Hi, Fiorella. How are you?
Good. How are you, Dom?
I am good. I am just getting everything set up for us. I love that you are my early bird today.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I for a moment I thought I was late. I was like, oh, it's 2:30.
No, you're good.
Awesome. How's your day going?
My day is going well. It got busy for a little bit and then it cleared up, and I am good with clear. Gives me
That's
all
good.
the time I need to
Yep.
help you guys. Mm.
That's good.
Hi there, Anthony. How are you today?
Good. How are you?
Good. Oh, trying to figure out what we're doing here, guys. There we go. That's what I needed. Can you guys see my screen okay?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. This is really funny. Normally, when I do this, there it is. Okay. Just trying to make sure I could see everybody who's here today. All right, everybody. I am going to go ahead and get started. As people jump in, they can join us. I appreciate you guys being on time. I also appreciate everybody understanding the little bit of a hiccup we had last week with the connection. So we're going to jump right back in. I'm going to start over for everybody. We're going to start with the exclusive right to represent buyer. Somehow right now I can't see any of your faces, and that's okay. If you have a question, feel free to jump in. You can say something, you can add something to the chat. I really love for these to be interactive, and yet if I just sit here and explain what to fill in every box, that's okay too. But please stop me if you have a question, if you want a little bit more clarity. Okay, so starting with the exclusive right to represent buyers. On the first page, obviously, the agreement is made the date you're filling this in. If you are meeting with a client tomorrow and you're preparing this in advance for them, you want to make sure that you're putting in the date that you're going to be sitting down with your client and explaining it and having them sign. The next section, buyer. You want to make sure you get the complete and accurate spelling for your client and how they want their name written on paperwork. You may know somebody as Joe Smith, and that's great, but on the contract, he wants his name to be Joseph Q. Smith. You want to put in the full name exactly how he wants it spelled. You will put the name of all buyers in the same agreement. If it's 1, 2, 3, 5, they all go in this same section. Next section, broker, is going to be KW Metro Center. Don't put your broker's name, obviously, just put KW Metro Center. In this next section, section 3 up here, you need to put in at least 2 forms of contact for your buyer. It can be mailing address and phone number, phone and email, email and address. The reason for this is, should the unthinkable happen and you guys are unreachable, I always go really dark with this. I'm going to go really happy with this today. You are overseas on vacation and something happens, a communication goes down and you can't reach your client and something happens. I need to, and all of your brokers need to have 2 different ways to reach your client so that we can step in and help. The broker firm, this is a place where you want to put in all the information. You're going to put your office's address, your office's main phone number. And this is a big one that people get wrong. They see email here, and a lot of people want to, it's my client. I want my clients to know my email address. There's a place later in the contract for your email address. This needs to be your broker's email address. So the broker that's going to be signing the paperwork, everybody who's doing a Virginia contract in the Tyson's office, this is going to be Dominique at KW Metro Center. If you're Arlington, Alexandria, or Midlothian, you're going to fill in your Virginia broker's information. Terms and termination. The rule right now is if nothing is filled in here, it automatically defaults to 90 days. I will tell you, all of the brokers and all of the offices, we will not sign off on this without an actual date. You need to have a conversation with your client on how long your agreement is for. There's no right or wrong answer. You can sign this for 1 week, 1 month, 1 year, 362 days, whatever agreement you and your client come to. You're going to put the date in here. This next section, you can choose if you want to add an early termination fee. What the early termination fee is, if for some reason other than if the buyer has good cause for canceling it, this wouldn't necessarily apply. But if they have no good reason, they just decide, I don't want to work with you anymore. You have the right to choose to put a fee in here. I know a lot of agents don't charge one. I see a lot of agents that have a set number that they put no matter what. And then there are some agents that put in their actual expenses. They use the words actual expenses. Then if they do end up canceling with you, you have to prove what those actual expenses are. So you have receipts of things. That is a purely individual decision, or if you're on a team, your team might have a number that they want you to put in there, but it's whatever you decide. We want to make sure at the end of every page, we're having your buyer's initial, although guys, I think I may have pulled the wrong one because this is a slightly older version. All of the spaces that we fill in are the same. This is not at the bottom of the page anymore. I'm not sure why we pulled a 2019 revision. Something you guys will want to watch. There's always a revision number at the bottom. I pulled this from DocuSign and I'm not sure why it's the older one. Before we finish, I'll go back and find the new one just to let you know what the changes are. But the newer one, I believe, is 22. And you can find this on every single form we use. There's always a revision date down at the bottom. All right, next section. This is a very, very commonly ignored one. Line 7, purpose, buyers retaining broker for what purpose? You can be very specific. If you have a client that says, I only want to hire you to show me condos, you can write condos in there. If it's, you can be as specific or generic as you want. I typically will write in here residential property. They have hired you to find a home, and a home is considered a residential property. The next section, retainer fee, same as early termination. This is a completely individual decision. If you decide to take a retainer fee, that's up to you. What I will tell you, there's a lot of scrutiny on this, and you want to be careful of fair housing guidelines. If you charge a retainer fee to one client, you should charge a retainer fee to all clients, and it should be consistent. You're not going to charge $5 to one person and $500 to another person, because why? Why the discrepancy? That being said, if you choose to take one, that's fine. You're going to fill in the amount here. You're going to put here afterwards, it shall or shall not be subtracted from any compensation. So if you have a $500 retainer fee that gets deducted from the compensation when it closes, then you say it shall. If it's a non-refundable fee that they pay regardless whether they buy something or not, and it is non-refundable regardless, but if it's in addition to the compensation. So let's say with a buyer agreement, you're accepting whatever the MLS is offering, but you're taking a $500 retainer fee and you get that in addition to the MLS, then you're going to say it shall not be subtracted. I'm spending a lot of time on this because we've seen this one come up a couple of times recently, and there have been some headaches in it. So if you decide to do a retainer fee, I would also recommend you have a conversation with your broker to understand how to do it and make sure you're doing it correctly. Payment, this next section here, you have to put an amount in here. You can use some terminology, and I will give you that as well, but there's got to be an actual meeting of the minds here. If there's nothing written in here, there's a lot of ambiguity in this form. If you are charging your client 3%, the way this agreement says, it says you are charging them 3%. If the co-broker is offering out 2.5%, theoretically, according to the agreement, the buyer is still responsible to pay you that extra 0.5%. There are a lot of agents who do this. If you do this, you need to also make sure you're having a conversation with your client and explaining to them that, you know, my fee is 3%. Sometimes we get offered a co-broker from the listing agent. If it's 3%, great, it offsets your entire cost. If it's 2.5%, that means you only have to bring 0.5% to closing. There are a lot of different scripts around this. This is a class for another day, and yet you've got to have something in here. You can't leave it blank. You can't say zero. Zero means I'm not taking any commission. We do also allow you to write as per MLS offering. And that means I have agreed that I am just going to accept what the listing agent offers. That's the only time you can put in there that something other than an actual number. Does that make sense so far, everybody?
Yeah, but if they end up buying property by the owner, sells FISBOs, or
and you fall into a situation where technically there's no MLS offering and technically you might not get paid. If you have a conversation with somebody about a FISBO, about a property that's off market, you want to have a conversation about the compensation before making that offer, and you may need to adjust your buyer broker agreement before submitting that offer.
Okay.
Yeah, that was an excellent question, by the way. Thank you. This next section down here also gets missed a lot, or sometimes people will just put a 0 in here. Guys, this section protects you from the unethical element out there. There are people out there that, you know, I would hope 100% of the time that your clients are completely loyal to you, completely committed to you, and there are just people out there that you can't account for. This line says, if within blank days after expiration or buyer's early termination, the buyer enters into a contract to acquire property discussed for the purpose in the paragraph, then you're due a commission. So what this says is, I typically will put 60 days in here. So what this means is I've shown somebody a property. We've done all of the paperwork. We're ready to go. We're ready to write an offer. Somehow shady Mr. Seller gets the phone number for buyer and says, hey, I'll fire my agent, you fire your agent, we'll split the savings down the middle. What do you say? This agreement says if they purchase it within 60 days of the termination, you are still due a commission. So if you explain that really well, your buyer would say, hopefully your buyer would just say, no, never mind, let's move on. But if they do say something, if I buy this within the next 60 days, I still owe my agent a commission, so I'm not saving any money. Sure, go ahead.
Sorry, quick question. So on that, and that is only for the properties that you show to that client. It's
Yes.
not like any other property.
Right, because you've got to be the procuring cause. Like if they decide today that they don't want to work with you anymore, they end their agreement with you, they sign a new agreement with another agent immediately after firing you, new agent takes them out and shows them a property you've never shown them, you're not the procuring cause of that transaction. But
Perfect.
And it is very difficult to prove procuring cause. So you've got to have really good notes about everything. In 20 years, I've only heard personally, like I know it's happened, I've only heard personally of somebody arguing procuring cause and winning and getting the commission. And I believe it was actually a 6-figure commission. So I understand why he went after it, but he had the notes to back up his claim.
And
Thank
this
you.
60 days very common.
No, it's really, really not. It's very few and far between. And yet you have auto insurance for the day you get into the accident, even if you've never had an accident for 60 years. You have, this is your commission insurance. The next section, relocation program, we very specifically point blank ask if the client is part of a relocation program. Any guesses why?
Military.
Nope. If you're a part of a relocation program, almost every single time across the board, the relocation program asks for a very, 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 very hefty referral fee for you to be the agent to represent the client. That's how they pay for a lot of the stuff that they offer to their client. So you need to know going into this, are you part of a relo program? Is there somebody I need to talk to? Are there extra forms that I need to sign? Is there something I need to know? So you've got to say, yes, I am part of one. No, I'm not part of one. If they say, no, I'm not part of one, and then all of a sudden they are, you want to go back and have a conversation, because technically, per the original agreement, you wouldn't necessarily owe anything to the relocation company. But if the relocation company comes into the picture and they say, well, we really want to go with the relo, they're going to give us a lot of blah, 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 you may have to amend this, or you would possibly lose the transaction. Your client might walk away if you don't agree to work with it. The next section, this is where we get into the types of real estate presentation. Are you a seller representation, buyer representation, designated, and dual? You have to check yes or no for both of these sections. It will get kicked back to you if you don't have a selection. Now, designated representation, if they say they do not consent to designated representation, that means that the other 1,000+ Metro Center agents, if one of us has a listing, you cannot represent your buyer purchasing that property. So it's really in their best interest to say yes to designated representation, because it doesn't cut out a huge chunk of the market. The next section, dual representation. Again, this is a very, very personal decision, deciding if you want to do it, if you don't want to do it. I know tons of agents who do. I know tons of agents who never will. If you don't have a preference, then you talk to your buyers and explain the difference and let them choose. If you have a firm stance that you absolutely will never do dual agency, then you just go ahead and check does not and explain to them why it's not an option. Okay. Note that if you do end up writing on a property that's listed by Metro Center, or that you are the listing agent for, there's a whole nother set of disclosures that you have to sign before you can even start negotiating the property. Again, a class for another day, but if they consent to it and it happens, there's more paperwork to do. You do need to note if the buyer has an active or an inactive real estate license. Guys, this doesn't mean a Virginia license. This means a real estate license anywhere in the world. If they are licensed in Alaska, you are still checking this. If they are not actively licensed, if their license is inactive, but they have one, you are still checking this to say, yes, they do, no, they don't. A lot of boilerplate stuff that it's really good to read through this, but this is all the standard boilerplate, like protect the client, protect the agent process. Other provisions in here, this blank line is a catch-all for anything else that might come up. I will tell you, they have started cracking down a lot with all of our forms. Anytime it has one of these blank lines, a lot of the contracts that used to have these blank lines are gone, because when you start writing language in here, you've got to be very, very careful how you word it, how you craft it. It borders on practicing law, because you are adding verbiage to a legal contract. When in doubt, if you have something that needs to go in this section, check with your broker or check with your title company and make sure it's written in such a way that it doesn't violate any laws or regulations, but it's also clear enough that it gets across the point that you're hoping it gets across. And then you come down to the bottom. Note this, you do want to make sure you explain this to your clients, that if they have a buyer agreement, if they've signed an agreement with you and they go visit any resale or new homes, they need to make sure that they, buyer should consult with buyer agent before visiting. They should talk to you before they go visit anything, so there's not any confusion. There have been times where buyer has gone to an open house and the agent at the open house has convinced them to sit down with them and that it's a great idea for them to represent them in the transaction and will write the offer for them. Again, you fall into a little bit of issue of proving who's the procuring cause, because if you were not with them at the open house and they chose to sit down and write a contract with somebody else, how do you prove which one of the two buyer agents gets paid? The other side of that is new home construction. If you don't go with them on their first visit, a lot of times builders won't pay the commission to you, because builders, it's not actually a commission, it's a marketing fee. So just make sure you have that conversation with your client and say, anywhere you go, make sure they know, if I can come with you, I will come with you. If I can't, make sure they know you're represented. One of the things that I tend to do is when I meet with clients, I will give them a stack of my business cards and say, here, these are your get out of jail free cards. If you go to an open house without me or a new home community, hand them my card and say, this is my agent. That's how you register, by giving my information, not yours. And then you're going to come down here. Your buyers are going to sign. This line is not for you. This line is for your broker. You always make sure your buyers sign everything before the broker does. We cannot sign this if we don't have your client's agreement. If you send it to us first, we're going to kick it back. This is the section where you're going to put your information. All of your contact information you want them to have. Again, you already put our stuff at the top. You're also going to put it down here so that they have a way to reach you. They also have a way to reach me, just in case. Buyer one is super easy. That's why we went through that first. Any questions so far?
Are these agreements for all the states? Is this for Virginia or
This
DC?
is just Virginia today. I know they're going to have more classes on how to fill this out for DC and Maryland. I am not licensed in either of those jurisdictions, so I wouldn't even be able to begin to tell you how to fill those out.
Okay,
This is just a Virginia contract.
good. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, now we're going to go to the listing agreement. There is a whole lot more information in this one. I'm going to try to get through all of this and explain to you what is what in here. The biggest thing that I said it for the buyer agreement, I'll say it here: blank lines are your enemy. Don't leave blank lines anywhere. If there's any ambiguity, put NA in there, non-applicable. You want to make sure you have read and acknowledged that it's there. Do not leave any check boxes empty. If you leave a checkbox empty, it's going to get kicked back to you. If there's a section where it has to be an either or, you've got to check one. If you don't check it, we don't have a meeting of the minds. Okay, so same thing, we're going to start at the top. What is the date of the agreement? What is the full legal spelling of our client's name, how they have it on the deed, how they want to sign the paperwork? And then we've got Metro Center. This next section, property address. There's a lot of different lines in here. You may not be able to fill in all of them, but you need to fill in as many as you can, because the more information you have, the less chance that we get into an issue where there's confusion in the property. So you want to do the street address. If it's a condo, you add the unit number, city. We already pre-print Virginia in for you, zip code. I'm going to take a second to do a quick note here, because this came up with on one of the emails that our broker sends out. One of our brokers, Rick Basel, sends out these fun little stories. This happened to someone in Virginia. I don't think it was a Metro Center agent, but it happened with somebody in Virginia in the last year. They were not licensed in Maryland, and they tried to sell a Maryland property and they just wrote the address in here and then wrote Maryland. And somehow it got through the system and went online. Guys, this form is only for Virginia properties. Do not use it for DC, do not use it for Maryland, do not use it for West Virginia, do not use it for Alaska. Okay, sorry, I just had to say that because when that one came up, I was a little floored. You also want to put the tax map ID number on here. Do you guys know how to find the tax map ID? Have you guys taken a Bright MLS class yet?
Yeah, I was gonna say Bright MLS. but-
Okay, so in Bright MLS, when you're looking at a property, there's going to be a button you can click that says tax record. The top right-hand side of the page is going to be the tax ID number. You want to make sure you do the address and the tax ID, again, so that there's no confusion. If the property is being sold with a parking space, you want to make sure you put the parking space in here. If it comes with a storage unit, all of these things. These, I would say it's a huge piece to do as well. Another story that I heard about was property was listed with a parking space, contract was written, they wrote in here the parking space, get all the way to closing. At the closing table, they said, oh no, there's not actually a parking space with the unit. Okay, the contract was negotiated based on the fact that it had a parking space. So they went through and did a valuation for what parking spaces are worth in that area. And the seller ended up having to give the buyer a huge credit off of the price of the home because he had agreed to sell a parking space that didn't exist. So fill in as much information as you can. And when you're the listing agent or when you're the buyer's agent, make sure you're checking and you're writing in all the information too, because those little hiccup, those glitches, it's almost always ruled for in favor of the person who didn't write it. The next section, legal block and description. We've already written the address. We've already written the tax ID number. We have a clear idea of what the property is. You're still going to go in here and write the legal description. If it's lot, block, and subdivision, this is what most homes in our area are going to be. You will find all of this on the tax record. You may not have all 4 pieces, but whatever numbers you have from the tax record, you're also going to write the subdivision or condominium name here so that we know what building we're talking about. County and municipality, this is Arlington, City of Alexandria, City of Falls Church, whatever. Meets and bounds, this is more very, very rural Virginia that you're going to see. You're not really going to see this in any of the close-in counties. But if you have a property that the deed specifically mentions meets and bounds, you're going to check this and you're going to attach the description and copy. It'll just be an extra page on the contract. I will tell you in 20 years, I've never had to do one of these because I haven't sold in an area that they went by this, but they exist. So you need to know it's an option. Then you're going to get to MLS description. You want to be really clear with this too. Fill in as much as you can. How many levels are there? What kind of basement? Does it have a basement? Basement entrance type. That's, is it a walkout? Is it a walk up? Is it connected interior? Like all of the information you can give is better. Disability access. Does it have disability access or not? Does it have a lift? Does it have a ramp? Whatever the case may be. Notices. You want to make sure you have at least 2 forms of contact for your client in here. The reason for this is, again, should anything happen, we need to have a way to reach your client. So address and phone number and email and address. You get down here to broker. This is actually one of mine, so it was already pre-filled in. You're going to have the office address, the office phone number, and your broker's email address. Term of agreement, this is the same as the last one. When does the listing agreement end? Listing price. You have to write in the contract what price you and your client agree to list. There is one exception to this. If you have a listing that's a little bit further out and you haven't quite agreed on the price yet, you can write to be determined in there. However, if to be determined is written in here, you have to have a signed listing amendment with the actual sales price signed before you put this in the MLS. You're not allowed to list it until you have in writing agreement between the seller and the broker that a price has been picked. Does that make sense? I'm really good with uncomfortable silences.
Sorry, I was talking, muted. Yes, makes sense. Sorry.
Okay, good. Okay, conveyances, personal property versus fixtures. Personal property is stuff you get to take with you. Fixtures is stuff that is permanently attached to the property. This is where we get into a lot of debate in contracts. You want to make sure that you have filled this section in as clearly as possible. This is one of the best tools you have when putting a listing up, because if you have filled this in properly and sent it to, or put it in the MLS, then the buyers can come through and write what conveys and what doesn't. Then there's no ambiguity. Like if there is, well, let's go through this part first. Is there stuff in the home? Is there an alarm system? Yes or no? Is there a built-in microwave, ceiling fan, whatever? If there's one of something, you can just check it. If there's more than one of something, if there are 6 ceiling fans, you want to type in that there are 6 ceiling fans. If there's 6 ceiling fans, but only one of them conveys, you want to write 1, and then somewhere in the notes say which 5 don't convey. But anytime there's ambiguity, again, it falls back to the person who didn't write it. I personally had a transaction about 2 years ago where the contract was written, they checked ceiling fan, and when you don't list a number, the assumption is 1. And right before closing, the buyer tried to play some games because they felt like they had a little bit of leverage. And the seller, who I represented, said, you know what, we're okay with that, but they only asked for 1 ceiling fan. We're taking the other 5. Which one does he want? And they couldn't do anything about it because they had not delineated that there were 6 ceiling fans. But you want to go through, you check if it exists. If it does not exist, you leave it blank. Other conveyances, there are things that maybe they are allowing to stay with the property. If there's an extra refrigerator in the garage and they're leaving it, okay, cool, we're leaving it. If there's a hot tub in the backyard, okay, cool. I think that no, there's pool equipment and cover, but no, if there's a hot tub. But if it conveys, you want to make sure you mark, does the hot tub convey, or does the hot tub convey as is? Does the sprinkler system convey with guarantee, or does it convey as is? Things that do not convey. If there is a fridge in the garage, but the seller is not leaving that refrigerator, you want to make sure you notate that. If there are 2 refrigerators in the home and one is staying and one is not staying, you want to very specifically spell out which one is staying. If they're taking the nicer one in the kitchen and leaving the garage one, you need to note that. By the way, if they're taking the nice one in the kitchen and leaving the garage one, it's better to swap it out before it goes on the market. Oh, here you go. Sorry. The other conveyances apply. Other as-is items that the seller may be leaving. A lot of times these are still fixtures. Sometimes it might be something like they're leaving the grill for you. They're leaving patio furniture for you. Anything that the seller is agreeing to leave or the buyer is asking the seller to leave would be written in here. Again, this is all a negotiation when, it's a negotiation in the contract. It's not a negotiation here. This is if the seller is going to leave something that it's as is, they're just leaving it. This next section, as is marketing, you want to very specifically have a conversation with your client about, do you want the property marketed as is? I will tell you a really fantastic script that at this point, I don't know if I got it from somebody or if I came up with it on my own, but I'm going to share it with you anyway. When somebody talks about as is marketing, every home on the market is actually being sold as is. We may negotiate through the process and say, we are going to guarantee this, we are going to guarantee this, but everything is being sold as it is the day of contract. And then you can negotiate conditions and terms after that. When you specifically state as is marketing, this is more for the fixer-upper property that, like, there's a lot of stuff wrong with the home and the seller does not have the money or does not want to spend the money to fix anything. So these are more of the homes that need TLC, the beaten down homes. They're maybe, I don't know, a hoarder house or something like that. So you want to very specifically clarify that with your clients. Are we marketing it as is, or are we marketing it normally? Okay. Leased systems. This is really, really, really important. There are a lot of things in a home that you may or may not know don't actually belong to the owners. When you get into communities where there are propane tanks, sometimes the seller owns the propane tank. A lot of times the propane tank is leased. I think there's going to be a new section soon, but this I would put in this section as well. Solar panels. There are a lot of times the solar panels aren't owned outright yet, or they're leased. You want to make sure that you are specifically noting this item is leased and it will transfer with the home, but the new owner has to take over the lease moving forward. Home warranty. If your client is deciding to offer a home warranty, you want to put in here cost not to exceed and the warranty provider to be. If the seller is offering it, you've probably already picked a company and you know the basic cost of the warranty that they're going to choose. Just because this hasn't filled in now doesn't mean during the contract negotiations the buyer might not ask for one. But if the seller is choosing it from day one, you want to specifically put in here, this is who the warranty provider is, this is the cost, so that the buyer can't say, oh, well, you said it was going to be blah, blah, blah warranty. We want the $2,000 policy. No, we agreed to pay for the $600 policy. Next section, again, you want to verify with your client. Does the home have oil, gas, electric, or other? Fill in all of the lines you can. A really, really important one in this section to fill in, obviously, public, private well, community well, public sewer or septic. If it has a septic system, again, this is the more rural properties, you want to mark that it has a septic system, and you want to specifically note how many bedrooms that the septic system perks for. Because if it has only been approved, if it's been determined that it perks for 3 bedrooms and you're trying to sell an 8-bedroom home, you can't do it. If the septic system is approved for a 3-bedroom home, you can market a 3-bedroom home. And to go on a slight tangent, in case you aren't sure what perk means, when you have a septic system, the septic field can only handle so much waste in a certain year. And 1 bedroom equals the amount of waste created by 2 human adults in a year. A 3-bedroom septic field can handle the waste of 6 average humans throughout the year. If you have a septic system perked for 3 and you build an 8-person home, you are probably going to overload that septic system and cause irreparable damage. So even if your seller wants to list it as a 5-bedroom or a 6-bedroom or an 8-bedroom, if it only perks for a 3-bedroom, you can only list it as a 3-bedroom. When a lot of these check marks are just if it actually has a septic system, is it a community, conventional, alternative, experimental? Your seller should know this information if they have that kind of a system. Is it operating under a waiver? Yes or no? Again, your seller will probably know this. If they don't, there are places where you can do the research and find out. Take the time and read through all of this. These are all things, the standard requirements for the broker to provide for the seller. These are things they can expect you to do. Here is another line that gets missed all the time, and they bolded it and people still miss it. Broker agrees that the showing instructions to be shared with other real estate licensees and their prospective buyers are as follows. The reason this is in bold, the reason this is a separate standalone line, because you need to make sure you've had a conversation with the sellers about how we're going to provide access. If they want it only by appointment only and the listing agent has to be there, put that in here. If it's vacant and people can just go and show at any time, put that in here. If they want it scheduled through Central Lock with a 2-hour notice, whatever you guys agree to, specifically put it in here. The reason for this is if we ever have a situation where somebody shows a property improperly, they don't request a showing, they don't call ahead or whatever. If you have gotten specific implicit instructions from the seller and you have followed those with how you have explained it to other agents and they don't follow it, that's how you prove the violation, that they didn't follow the instructions. So just be as clear as possible. Then we've got a bunch of check marks here. Yes or no, you can put a lockbox on the property. Yes or no, you can put a for sale sign on the property. I will tell you, if you sell a property off market, if it's not going in MLS, you absolutely positively cannot put a for sale sign in the yard. If you are incredibly fortunate and manage to get it under contract before you put it in the MLS, same thing, you cannot put a sign in the yard. If it was not ever publicly listed in the MLS, you cannot have a sign in the yard advertising the property. That's a story for another day. I have feelings about that, but I'm teaching you the rules and the regulations and keeping you out of real estate jail. The next section, this is another one of my biggest areas where I have to kick things back to agents. The seller does or does not authorize the broker to market it in the MLS. If the seller says yes, then you're putting it in the MLS to sell. If the seller says no, a couple of things trigger. If they say no, you have to sign a separate bright MLS form that says, I do not want my home listed in the MLS, and they have to initial 4 different boxes and sign at the bottom stating, yes, my agent has gone over all of the reasons why this is not in my best interest. I still don't want it in the MLS. So when I'm your broker and I see a no here, I'm also looking for that other form. If that other form isn't there, I'm kicking the listing back to you. But if you say yes, then when are you going to put it in the MLS? Are you going to put it in within 2 days of the agreement being signed, or on or before a specific date? I will tell you, you could put TBD here. I don't know how the brokers in the other offices work. I don't like TBD here. If it's within 2 days, great. If it's on or before a specific date, you could put the last day of the listing agreement. If you have a listing agreement signed through September 30th of this year, and you wanted to say, we'll put it in the MLS on or before September 30th, great. Because if you put it in June 1st, that's before the 30th. Now, when you go to put it on, I want you to get something in writing from your seller saying, okay, let's put it on sooner. But putting TBD here, we don't really have a meeting of the minds. We don't have an agreement of what's happening. But if you check 2 days, make sure it's in the MLS in 2 days. If you check on or before, make sure you put a date in here. Seller does or does not authorize the broker to market the property through the MLS or make it available to third-party websites. This is if you want it in the MLS, but you don't want it to syndicate to any other site anywhere, you can check seller does not authorize, but if you're putting it in the MLS, it just makes sense to get it out into all of the sites out there. But it's a choice between you and the seller. It just, I would say 99.99% of the contracts I see have it say, yes, we want it out everywhere. Displaying the property address, yes or no. If you're going to put it in the MLS, you're going to put the address in there. The whole point of putting it out there and marketing it is for people to know that your house is for sale. If you don't put the address out there, does anybody really know what they're looking at or what the address is? No. Seller does or does not authorize the display of unedited comments or reviews. It's a personal choice. You can say yes, you can say no. There are a couple of sites out there that if you say no and you don't allow the unedited comments, their sites won't syndicate it. And then sellers sometimes will get irritated that, well, why isn't my home on this site? Well, because you didn't want the unedited comments, and this site will only publish listings that allow the web traffic to post their unedited comments. Doesn't really do any harm unless you have somebody with a vendetta against you who's going to go out on all the different sites and say, oh, this house is disgusting. That's not the norm. That's the exception, and it doesn't happen very often. Seller authorizes or doesn't authorize the display of automated estimate of the property. This is basically the Zillow clause. Do the sellers want their property to syndicate to Zillow or Redfin? If you don't want it to go to those sites with the Zestimate or the Zillow estimate or whatever, then you say no. But the fact of the matter is most sellers want their property everywhere. Also, guys, if I'm going too fast, if you have any questions, please jump in. Otherwise, I'm going to keep powering through because it sounds like you're gathering it, you're taking everything in. This next section is about coming soon. If the seller is okay with you marketing it coming soon, there's a couple of extra pieces here. So it's yes, they do authorize, no, they don't authorize. If they do authorize, when are you putting it in the system? Again, it's within 2 days or on or before. One of the biggest things that makes me crazy is when a seller puts in here, we're listing the property within 2 days and we're putting it coming soon within 2 days. Well, which one? Because are you putting it coming soon today and active on the market tomorrow? If so, what's the point of the coming soon? So make sure you're specific with, I'm putting it in within 2 days, and then up higher, it would be on or before March 31st. But again, make sure you're putting a date here. The second thing is a property can only be listed in coming soon for 21 days. So if you want to put it coming soon today, just understand that it has to be changed to active within 21 days. If your clients aren't ready for it to be active in 21 days, don't put it coming soon yet, because they're very, very strict about those guidelines. The second thing to note is when a property is coming soon, you can put a sign in the yard. You can start sending stuff out about the property. You absolutely, positively, under no circumstances can allow the home to be shown to anybody during that time period. If it's an internal Metro Center agreement where you're doing the pre-marketing, but it's not in the MLS, it can be shown with the seller's permission. It can be shown to other Metro Center clients by other Metro Center agents. But the second it goes into the computer, into MLS as coming soon, there are 0 showings until the day it goes active in the MLS. If you allow it to be showed before then, you can actually get a violation against you. So just be careful. Again,
Dom, sorry, quick question.
Sure.
1 days, 20 days, correct? We're not counting business days.
21 days, 21 calendar days. There is almost nothing in any of the Virginia contracts that goes by business days. Everything is counted in calendar days.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sure. Was somebody else asking a question too? Nope. Okay, good. All right. We're back to designated and dual. Seller does or does not consent to designated. Makes sense. They want to consent to it because otherwise they're losing out a whole lot of buyers. Does or does not consent to dual. That's a personal agent and a personal seller choice, whether they want to or not. Again, I don't know why it's not in the buyer, but it is here. An additional disclosure is required before presenting an offer before a specific transaction. So if the buyer is also with Metro Center, you got to sign the form as you're negotiating the contract. Compensation, sorry guys, this shouldn't have been filled in. This is where you write in what the seller is agreeing to pay to you. Now with Metro Center, the minimum accepted, well, there are some occasions where you can take a little bit less, but you've got to speak with your broker and your team leader before doing that. But the bare minimum that we allow is 4.5%. You can charge whatever you'd like. You can charge 4.5, you can charge 6, you can charge 10, whatever you can negotiate and the seller's willing to pay. But 4.5 is kind of the lower threshold to make sure that we are not undercutting our business. We, Metro Center is very big on honoring the work that you guys do and teaching you to value your worth and making sure that we are not devaluing our industry. The second part of that, again, compensation is earned within however many days after termination. Same thing as the other one. If your shady seller and shady buyer try to fire you and come together, do within 60 days, within 120 days, whatever, you're still owed the commission. This next section down here, buyer agency compensation. This is a share of that first number. So to do an easy example, if you accept it, if you agree to a 6% commission and you agree to offer out 3% to the buy side, the first line up here is going to say 6%. This line is going to say 3%. The reason I'm very, very, very clear about this is I see so many listings come through where the agent will put the listing side and the buyer side. And if the listing side is 3% and the buy side is 2.5%, the listing side really should have said 5. If it says 3 and 2.5, you've basically said, all right, we'll offer 2.5 out to the buyers and I'm only keeping 0.5%. Because the seller has only agreed to pay a total of 3%. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes, it does.
All the time. I cannot tell. Seasoned agents too, like people who have been doing this for years. I will see one of those come in, and the nice thing about me and all of the other brokers here, we're going to send you a quick email or a text going, is that what you meant to do? And give you time to fix it so that you don't necessarily go back, and you still have to go back and have your clients initial it because we want to make sure everybody's understanding what was going on, but we'll give you the time to fix it rather than declining the whole thing. The other piece here, buyer agency compensation, KW Metro Center policy. We will not allow you to offer out less than 2.5% to the co-broker. The only exception to that rule is if you have a new construction builder and the new construction builder mandates that they will only pay out 2%. For builders, we will not offer out less than 2%. For all sellers that are not a new construction builder, we will not offer out less than 2.5%. Again, that comes back to not devaluing our industry. We want to make sure that we are raising the bar, not chasing it down to the ground. Other compensation. I don't really know any situation where you would see that. A lot of times other compensation has to do with like sub-agency, which is not something we do here in Virginia. If we have an agreement with the seller and the buyer doesn't have an agreement with anybody and somebody tries to write the contract for them, like we will pay a co-broker. We're not going to pay a sub-agent because we're not going to take on the liability of the sub-agent's actions. So you're going to write your co-broker offering here, and you're going to write NA here. Variable rate commission. This is a very, very, very big one, guys. If you offer a variable rate, what that means is I'm on ABC team and our rate is 6%. But if one of my ABC teammate members brings the buyer, we'll reduce the commission to 5%. That is a hidden benefit to the seller that can make the difference between two different offers. You have to disclose that. You have to let people know that there is a variable rate offered to the seller. If there's no variable rate, if it's 6% regardless, it's 5% regardless, you're going to put NA here. But if there is a variable rate, you have to very specifically spell out what that variable rate is. And in the MLS, you have got to check that, yes, there is a variable rate commission offered to the seller. Next section, we've got the retainer fee again. It's the exact same thing as we discussed in the buyer. If you take a retainer fee from one, take the retainer fee from all, and be very clear in the amount you're taking. Early termination, same as with the buyer. If you take one, charge it for all and be very, very specific in the amount you're taking. The next section, this section here, you're going to check yes or no. Does the seller give the broker and sales associate permission to disclose other offers? There are a lot of different thoughts on this. Some agents don't want to be able to disclose anything because they don't want to give anything away. I can't tell you that. I can't tell you what the other offers were. If you don't want to, if you want to be able to say, no, I'm not allowed to share that information with you, check does not authorize. If you do want to be able to use it, check does authorize. There are pros and cons to it. Sometimes you don't want to tip your hand to be like, no, we don't have any offers. If you're not allowed to disclose that, you're not allowed to disclose that. But on the other hand, if you're negotiating offers and it says you're allowed to disseminate that information, you can share lots of information. You've got to be very careful, make sure you're following fair housing guidelines, make sure if you're sharing with one, you're sharing with all. But once an offer is received on a property, it's not a confidential agreement anymore. You have the right to use that information to share with others. For example, if somebody uses an escalation clause and they get accepted, you have to send an entire copy of the other offer. That's not a conflict. You're not denying somebody their confidentiality. As soon as they've given you the offer, it's open, available information. Does that make sense? I think I just use a lot of confusing words. You guys following me? Okay, I'm assuming that's a yes. All right. Compliance with fair housing laws. Obviously, we want to make sure we're following all fair housing guidelines. Relocation program. This is the same as with the buyers. We want to know if there's somebody else involved that we need to be having conversations with and we need to be signing paperwork for. The next two sections are condominium association and property owners association. It's essentially the same thing. You want to say, yes, it is in a condo association. No, it's not. You have to check one or the other. If it's not in one, you just ignore this whole next section. If it is in one, you want to say, is the seller or the broker going to order the association documents? Are they going to order it at the time of listing, within 3 days following the contract, or some other date? There are pros and cons with both of those. If it never ends up going to settlement and you're not ordering until within 3 days of closing or 3 days of contract, then they don't have to pay for an agreement for a property that didn't sell. If you order it at the time of listing, you will probably have that document in hand before you ever go under contract. And when you deliver the ratified contract, you also deliver the condo docs immediately, and their 3-day right of rescission starts immediately. The 3-day right of rescission with HOA and condo docs doesn't start until the buyer gets the paperwork. If you don't order it until you're under contract, they have a lot of extra time. It's not just 3 days. They could have 3 weeks, depending on how slow and backed up that condo association is. Then we get down here. You've got to put in what the dues are and how often they're charged. If there's any special assessment, you want to make sure you ask this question, because there have been closings where a seller and or an agent has kind of gotten blindsided, because if there's a special assessment on a property, that special assessment has to be cleared before title is transferred. This actually happened to a client of mine about probably 10 years ago, that there was a special assessment on the condo, and all of the owners had the choice of either paying the special assessment outright, or they could increase their condo dues and pay monthly until they paid their special assessment out. Well, when they marketed the property, they marketed at the higher special assessment condo fee. That's great, except the seller is not allowed to pass on their requirement to pay that special assessment to the new buyer. It actually had to be settled in full as part of the closing. And the seller closed for, I want to say it was about $10,000 less than they thought they were going to, because they just assumed they could pass that special assessment on. So you want to ask the question so that you know that you can explain to your seller, this is what's going on, and we need to account for this because this has to be cleared before settlement. So that's going to be something added to the net sheet. You want to put the condo association's name, management company, phone number, and you do want to ask them, are you current on all dues? Again, because this might come up in something that affects their bottom line. Exactly the same situation with properties association. If it is in one or it's not in one, if it's not in one, you skip this. If it is in one, you are going to fill out that exact same information here. The reason a lot of these questions are in here is to make sure you have had a conversation with the seller about something specific so that nobody gets blindsided later in the transaction. Property condition. I don't know many homes that are exempt from the act, but you do need to check if they are or are not exempt from the Virginia Residential Property Disclosure Act. If they are not, which most homes are not, there's a DPOR one-page form that you've got to fill out that is a disclosure that has to be given during the contract. Lead-based paint. If the home was built before or after 1978, you need to check one or the other. You don't have to do anything else. You just have to check. Yes, it was. No, it wasn't. If it was, there are other disclosures you need to sign. If it wasn't, you're good. You just keep moving. Current liens. This is another section where sellers will say, why do you need to know this? I am asking you these questions to make sure that everybody's on the same page, because if you owe money on the home and you think that you're free and clear and you're going to take the entire $800,000 when the house sells, we're going to have an issue when we get to the settlement table and you find out you've got a bunch of things to pay off. So you're going to check as many of these as apply as possible. If you check A, if there is no mortgage or deed or anything, you skip all the way to letter G. But if there is a first trust, you want to know who the lender is and an approximate balance and what type of loan it is. They don't have to be specific. If they owe about 240, okay, cool. They owe about 240. You don't need down to the penny unless you have a type C client who just wants to give you everything. But you do want to know who it is and what type of loan it is. If there's a second mortgage, you want to know that there's a second mortgage and how much. If there's a line of credit or a home equity loan, you want to know how much. Are they current on all of their payments? This is an issue because if the seller is behind on payments, there might be more fees or issues. It also could be on track to potentially be heading to foreclosure. So you want to ask, are you current on all of your payments? Are you in default for any thing? Have you received a notice from any of your loan holders? Yes or no? And you only check if the answer is yes. Are there any liens secured against the property for federal, state, or local taxes? Are there any judgments against the seller, including each owner jointly or separately? Has the seller filed for bankruptcy? This came up recently with another agent in one of our offices that the bankruptcy wasn't known about ahead of time, and it caused some hiccups in the closing because they had to get legal help with it. There had to be a ruling from the judgment to allow them to do part of the transaction. So you want to make sure that you go through and check as many of these as apply, but ask every question from your client. The next section, does the seller agree to offer seller financing? It's something that gets done. It's something that is offered here and there. It's not as few and far between as some of the other things that I brought up. I have never done a seller financing. That doesn't mean that they don't happen quite often. Quite honestly, right now with interest rates around 7%, if the seller doesn't need their money, maybe they do it at 6 or 6.5%, or if somebody who doesn't qualify for a traditional loan, they might even be able to do it for higher. This is just asking the seller, do you consent to talking about it? It doesn't obligate them to do it, but it says, yes, they might be interested in offering it out to a buyer. If they don't want to do it, then you just say no. And when somebody asks the question, no, the seller's not willing to do seller financing. Closing costs. There are closing costs for the buyer and the seller. This just says, have I included an estimated net sheet with the listing agreement or not? That's up to you if you want to do that or not. Even if you give them one, you don't necessarily have to include it as part of the agreement. This just says, is my estimated net sheet included as part of the listing agreement? This explains to the seller that Virginia has a wet settlement act. They don't get their money the day of closing. They have to make sure the property is recorded with the county. And it's technically about 48 days before they get their money. But this is where we very specifically say, you will not be getting a check at settlement. IRS and FIRPTA, you have to ask every single client, are you a foreign person as defined by FIRPTA? Every single person, you want to make sure you check, yes, they are, no, they're not. The reason for this is if they are considered a foreign person, the title company is required by law to withhold a certain percentage of their closing proceeds, just in case there are extra tax penalties that need to be covered before that foreign person heads out of the country. So you need them to say, yes, I am, no, I'm not. If they say, no, I'm not, and it turns out later they are, you're at least protected because you asked the question, and that's fraud on their part because they told you they weren't, and then they were. Down here, we've got more of these. Check yes or no. Yes or no, they're a licensed agent. Again, I don't care where they're licensed. It could be California, it could be England. If they have an active real estate license or an inactive one, you want to note it. The next is they do or do not have knowledge of the existence, removal, or abandonment of an underground storage tank on the property. It is or is not tenant occupied. If it's tenant occupied, there are other things that you kind of have to coordinate with, like coordinate showings and things. You just want to specifically say it is not tenant occupied if it's vacant or if the owner lives there. It's only tenant occupied if there's actually a lease and somebody has a lease ongoing. Seller does or does not have a recording system in the property. Now, a Ring doorbell is one thing. A Ring doorbell is outside of the property. Yes, it's at the front door. And yes, you want to make sure you explain to your clients, be careful what you say as we walk in and out of the house, because there's a good chance, most homes have them these days anyway, that they can hear and see what you're saying and doing. So, be cognizant of that. But if there are recording systems inside the home, you have to disclose that. You have to let potential buyers and buyer agents walking through the property that it's there. And this specifically came up, again, I don't remember how many years ago, but there was a case brought before a grievance because buyer and buyer's agent are standing in the kitchen, having a discussion about the home, having a discussion about, they really like it. They're going to put in an offer on it, yada, yada, yada. Oh, by the way, I can't remember if we saw, was there a garage door remote? 2 minutes later, buyer's agent phone rings. It's the listing agent. Listing agent says, the seller wanted to let you know that garage remote you're looking for is in the drawer right next to you. Which means the seller was watching and listening to the entire conversation, the entire negotiating strategy session. Don't assume that they have disclosed this to you and don't have these conversations in the home. It's always best to have them outside and away from the property. And B, if you are representing the seller, if there is any kind of recording device, you either need to turn them off and take them out of there, or you need to disclose to everybody who walks in through the property that it's there. Sorry, I had to get on my soapbox about that one because that one was a really big one. Again, this is, I want you guys to read through all of this. If you have any questions about anything in here, please, please, please feel free to reach out to me. I will put, actually, let me put my email address in. You guys all have my email address. You have my email address. Reach out to me, ask me any questions, ask your broker any questions. But this is all the, somebody sued over something stupid and now we have a clause about it. This section says attorney's fees. This is actually a really important one. So it used to just be attorney's fees if you won in court. So if there was a dispute between buyer and seller, and buyer's attorney sends a letter to the seller, seller ignores it. Buyer's attorney sends a letter to the seller, seller ignores it. Buyer's attorney sends a letter to the seller, seller finally says, okay, fine, whatever, I will pay what I need to. All three of those letters, the buyer had to pay the attorney to write, but it didn't go to court. So the seller's not responsible for that letter every time it was written. The seller would only have to pay legal fees if it went to court and the ruling was against the seller, the buyer won, then the seller would have to pay that. Now they have kind of changed that a little bit to say all legal fees, whether it goes to court or not. Like if I have to send you 5 letters from my attorney to get you to do the right thing, I can actually request those legal expenses as well, not just the court ones. Now, that being said, you don't always get all of it, but it's important to note that it's in there. So when you're advising your seller or your buyer, that it's not just if it goes to court, it's all legal action that may need to be taken in the process. Again, now we're back down to this additional terms, this blank line again. If you're going to write anything in this blank line, make sure you reach out to your broker or your title company and double check that what you have written is clear, unambiguous, and ethical, and you're not writing anything in there that's going to get you in trouble or is going to, get you slapped on the hand for practicing law. Seller's going to sign here, then your broker is going to sign here. And just like with the buyer broker, you've got the sales associate information and the broker information. And that is the meat and the potatoes of the buyer agreement and the listing agreement. There are also a ton of disclosures that you have to send as well. When you log into Command and create an opportunity, it will actually give you like this, you need this form and this form and this form and this form. Everything else is a disclosure. And I do teach those in the contracts class and some other classes. So we'll go over all of those. But today was just about teaching you how to fill out these two forms. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see your beautiful faces or your beautiful names, because we don't have any cameras on. That's fine. Does anybody have any questions?
Can I print the agreements so that way I can actually go through every single detail?
Absolutely. All of these agreements are accessible in Command. They're also accessible through DocuSign. You all should have been set up with your Command accounts. If you go in and create an opportunity, it will be there. Also, you guys are all members of NBAR, correct? You can actually go directly to NBAR as well and pull those forms down. But if there's a specific form, if you can't find access to it through Command, shoot me a quick note and I will try to send you a blank copy that doesn't have all of my information in it.
Thank you, Dom.
You're welcome. Any other questions today, guys? Was this helpful?
Yes, very helpful. Thank you. Thank you to go through every single detail.
Thanks, Dominique.
You're very welcome. I wish you all the best of luck. You are going to be amazing. You are all with incredible offices with great resources. Your brokers in every single one of your offices are awesome people. Like we all talk all the time, and don't ever hesitate to reach out. They are there to help you. All right, that's it. Have a great weekend, guys.
Gotcha. I'm sorry. I have
Thank
one
you.
question.
Oh, sure. Anthony, what's up?
I've been like listening the whole time, but I've been like getting ready for work at the same time. I was wondering if I could just put my email in the chat and you could send me the recording. And I'll just rewatch it.
Everybody who sent me, were you on the attempted class the other day?
No, I have someone on my team sent me the Zoom link to this one.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Put your email in the chat, because everybody who was on the attempted chat, the attempted class the other day, we're going to send out the recording later. So Anthony, if you put yours in the chat, I'll grab it and add it to the list.
Gotcha. Putting that right now. Okay, cool. Thank you so much.
You are welcome. Everybody have a great weekend. Go out there and sell some homes.
Thank you as well. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Dom. Have a great weekend.
You're welcome. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.